People who shine the brightest rarely feel the need to announce their light. On a crisp October evening, the ballroom of the Whitmore Grand Hotel glittered beneath towering crystal chandeliers, where the city's wealthiest philanthropists gathered for Charlotte Whitmore's annual charity gala. Luxury cars lined the entrance while elegantly dressed guests exchanged polished smiles, expensive handshakes, and carefully rehearsed compliments. Across the street, Nathan Brooks paused before crossing with his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. He looked down at the invitation one more time, making sure they had come to the right place. It still felt unbelievable that the tickets had ended up in their hands after a kind elderly neighbor, suddenly unable to attend, insisted they should enjoy a night neither of them could ever afford. Nathan adjusted the sleeves of his neatly pressed navy blazer, one he had purchased years ago for a military retirement ceremony, and carefully preserved ever since. It fit a little tighter now, and although the fabric showed its age under bright lights, he wore it with quiet dignity. Lily held his hand while smoothing the soft burgundy dress she had found at a neighborhood thrift shop. Her brown coat protected her from the autumn breeze, and her bright blue eyes sparkled with excitement as she admired the glowing hotel entrance. "Dad," she whispered, "do you think there will be chocolate cake?" Nathan smiled, his tired eyes softening instantly. "If we're lucky, sweetheart. But remember why we're here." Lily nodded with complete seriousness before grinning again. "To see fancy people helping other people." Nathan chuckled gently. "Something like that." They walked toward the entrance together, attracting only brief glances from arriving guests whose tailored tuxedos and designer gowns contrasted sharply with Nathan's simple clothing. He noticed those looks without reacting. Years earlier, he had learned that silence often carried more strength than explanations ever could. The doorman politely checked their invitation before welcoming them inside. Warm golden light replaced the evening chill as music floated through the magnificent ballroom. Massive floral arrangements decorated every corner, while servers carrying silver trays moved gracefully among hundreds of influential guests. Lily's eyes widened in amazement. "Dad, it's like a castle." Nathan squeezed her hand. "Stay close." She nodded obediently but could not stop smiling. For the first time in months, he saw pure childhood wonder replacing the quiet maturity that life had forced upon her since losing her mother. That alone made accepting the invitation worthwhile. Nathan quietly led her through the crowd, careful not to disturb anyone. They stopped near a large display highlighting the Foundation's charitable projects, reading stories about scholarships, hospitals, and veterans assistance programs. Nathan lingered before the veterans section for only a brief moment before guiding Lily onward without saying a word. His expression never changed, but something deep behind his calm eyes flickered before disappearing again. Lily noticed. She always noticed. "Everything okay, Dad?" she asked softly. He smiled with practiced reassurance. "Everything's perfect." Across the ballroom, Charlotte Whitmore prepared backstage for her keynote speech, surrounded by executives and photographers eager to capture another successful evening celebrating generosity and influence. Neither she nor anyone else in that glittering room paid the slightest attention to the quiet father and his daughter who had just entered. Yet before the night ended, every conversation inside that ballroom would revolve around the man no one had bothered to truly see. The quickest way to reveal a person's character is to watch how they treat someone they believe has nothing to offer. Soft orchestral music faded as the ballroom lights gently dimmed, signaling the beginning of Charlotte Whitmore's opening address. Conversations dissolved into polite applause while guests turned toward the grand stage framed by enormous digital screens displaying images of hospitals, children's programs, and community projects funded by the Whitmore Foundation. Charlotte stepped confidently beneath the spotlight in an elegant emerald evening gown, every movement reflecting years of commanding boardrooms and public audiences. She smiled with practiced warmth as cameras immediately focused on her. "Good evening," she began, her voice smooth and composed. "Tonight is about generosity, responsibility, and building a better future together." More applause followed. Nathan stood quietly near the back beside Lily, allowing taller guests to gather in front of them. He lifted Lily slightly so she could see the stage more clearly. "Can you see now?" he whispered. She nodded enthusiastically. She's prettier than on TV. Nathan smiled. Maybe. Charlotte continued speaking about success, determination, and giving back to society. Her words were polished, carefully chosen, and welcomed by approving nods throughout the ballroom. Then her eyes drifted across the audience, briefly scanning every section before stopping on Nathan and Lily. Something about their modest appearance immediately caught her attention. They looked out of place among tailored tuxedos, sparkling jewelry, and luxury fashion. Charlotte hesitated for only a second before continuing. Events like this remind us that real charity isn't simply showing up where opportunities exist, she said with a faint smile. It's about contributing instead of expecting others to carry us. Several guests chuckled politely, assuming it was nothing more than a general observation. Charlotte's gaze remained fixed in Nathan's direction. Unfortunately, she added, there will always be people who believe attending a charity event somehow makes them charitable. Laughter spread more noticeably across the room. A few nearby guests glanced toward Nathan, quietly connecting Charlotte's words with the plainly dressed father standing near the rear of the ballroom. One businessman smirked before whispering something into his wife's ear. Another woman looked Nathan up and down before turning away with visible disinterest. Lily slowly looked around, confused by the growing laughter. She tugged gently on her father's sleeve. Dad, are they laughing at us? Nathan looked into her innocent eyes. For the briefest moment, pain crossed his face before disappearing beneath the same calm expression she had always known. He knelt beside her until they were eye level. Sometimes people laugh because they don't know someone's story, he said softly. That doesn't mean we stop being kind. Lily searched his face for reassurance. Finding it, she gave a small nod, although her smile had faded. Nathan stood again without looking toward the stage. He neither defended himself nor reacted to Charlotte's remarks. Years of discipline had taught him that dignity rarely needed an audience. Nearby, a server accidentally clipped another employee while turning, causing an entire tray of sparkling glasses to crash onto the polished marble floor. Crystal shattered loudly across the ballroom. Several guests immediately stepped backward to avoid the mess, some visibly annoyed that their evening had been interrupted. Before anyone from the hotel staff could respond, Nathan quietly walked forward. Without saying a word, he removed his blazer, folded it neatly over a nearby chair, and began helping the embarrassed young server gather the larger pieces of broken glass while shielding the employee from further criticism. Lily immediately knelt beside her father, carefully picking up linen napkins that had fallen nearby. Around them, conversations briefly stopped. Charlotte noticed the scene from the stage. She watched the father she had just indirectly mocked helping someone without expecting recognition, yet she dismissed the moment as nothing more than an attempt to gain sympathy. She returned to her speech, unaware that several people in the room had begun seeing Nathan very differently than she did. Kindness has a strange way of making noise without ever raising its voice. The shattered glass had barely been cleared when the ballroom gradually returned to its polished rhythm. Servers resumed circulating with silver trays, musicians continued playing soft jazz, and conversations slowly drifted back toward investments, charity auctions, and business opportunities. Yet a subtle change had taken place. Several guests who had witnessed Nathan helping the young server found themselves glancing in his direction more often than before. Nathan accepted a quiet thank you from the embarrassed employee with nothing more than a nod. "You didn't have to do that, sir," the young man said, still flustered. Nathan smiled gently as he slipped his blazer back on. "Everyone deserves a hand when they need one." The employee stood speechless for a moment before returning to work. Lily looked up proudly at her father. "You always help people." Nathan shrugged with a faint smile. "Someone once taught me that the easiest thing to carry is kindness. It doesn't weigh anything." Before Lily could answer, an elderly guest standing nearby approached them. His silver hair was neatly combed, and he leaned lightly on a polished wooden cane. "Young lady," he said warmly to Lily, "your father just reminded everyone what real class looks like." Lily beamed. "I think he's the best dad in the world." The gentleman laughed softly before shaking Nathan's hand. "Harold Benson," Nathan Brooks. Harold studied Nathan's posture for a brief second. There was something familiar about the way the man stood, straight shoulders, calm eyes, measured movements. It was not something easily learned. Before Harold could ask another question, another guest called him away. As he walked off, he looked back once more with quiet curiosity. Across the ballroom, Charlotte stepped down from the stage after concluding her speech. Executives immediately surrounded her with congratulations, reporters requested interviews, and photographers asked for more pictures. While smiling politely for every camera, she noticed several guests looking toward the same corner of the ballroom instead of toward her. Her assistant, Melissa, leaned closer. "The gentleman who helped the server seems to be getting attention." Charlotte glanced briefly at Nathan. "People love simple gestures. They'll forget in 5 minutes." Melissa nodded, although she wasn't entirely convinced. Nearby, 2 middle-aged men wearing discreet lapel pins shaped like crossed American flags quietly observed Nathan from across the room. One narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. "Do you recognize him?" the first man whispered. The other hesitated. "Not exactly, but there's something about him." "Military?" "Maybe." Nathan remained completely unaware of their conversation. Lily had discovered a small table displaying handmade thank you cards created by children from local community centers. She carefully picked one decorated with colorful stars. "Dad, can we write one too?" Nathan smiled. "Of course." They sat together at the writing table while elegant guests passed by without paying much attention. Lily carefully printed her message in large uneven letters, "Thank you for helping families." Nathan quietly added a shorter note beneath hers, "Compassion changes lives more than wealth ever can." As they placed the card into the collection box, an elderly woman watching nearby wiped away a tear. "That's beautiful," she whispered. Nathan simply thanked her and stepped aside so others could participate. Not once did he mention the mocking remarks made earlier. Not once did he seek sympathy from anyone in the room. His attention remained focused entirely on making sure Lily enjoyed the evening she had been so excited about. From the balcony overlooking the ballroom, Charlotte happened to witness the father and daughter laughing together over something only they could hear. She folded her arms. "Interesting," she murmured to herself. "He certainly knows how to play the humble role." Her assumption settled comfortably in her mind, reinforced by years of believing she could accurately judge people within moments of meeting them. She had no idea that several eyes in the ballroom were no longer studying Nathan with curiosity alone. Quiet recognition had begun to spread among a handful of guests, and before the night reached its end, that quiet recognition would become impossible for anyone in the room to ignore. Respect recognizes itself long before the world learns a person's name. The evening continued beneath a veil of polished elegance, but the current inside the ballroom had begun to shift in ways most guests could not yet sense. Nathan and Lily wandered quietly through the silent auction displays, stopping occasionally to admire handcrafted artwork and photographs donated for the Foundation's fundraising campaign. Lily pointed toward a painting of a mountain sunrise. "That one reminds me of when we watched the sun come up after camping." Nathan smiled. "Your mom loved mornings like that." Lily reached for his hand without saying another word. Some memories required no conversation. A few feet away, Harold Benson remained deep in thought. During his years as chairman of several veterans' charities, he had met countless active duty officers and retired service members. There was something unmistakable about Nathan's calm discipline. It was not merely the straight posture or the measured pace. It was the habit of constantly observing every exit, every movement, every person entering the room without appearing anxious. Harold quietly approached another guest wearing a small bronze lapel pin bearing the insignia of a military association. "Tom," Harold whispered, "do you happen to know that gentleman over there?" Tom Reynolds followed Harold's gaze. His expression changed almost immediately. "No, but look at the way he stands." Harold nodded. "Exactly." Tom narrowed his eyes further. "See the ring on his right hand?" Harold looked carefully. Nathan wore a simple silver ring engraved with a small cross sword's emblem, worn smooth after years of use. To most people it appeared decorative. To Tom, it looked strangely familiar. "I've seen that insignia before," Tom murmured. "I just can't remember where." Neither man approached Nathan. Instinct told them that if he had wanted attention, he would already have drawn it to himself. Across the ballroom, Charlotte accepted congratulations from members of her executive board while photographers continued capturing images for the following day's newspapers. One board member leaned toward her. "Interesting fellow over there." Charlotte glanced briefly toward Nathan. "The father?" People seemed drawn to him. Charlotte gave a faint smile. Every charity event has someone who becomes the evening's emotional story. "Maybe. Trust me," Charlotte replied confidently. "I've hosted enough of these to know the difference between sincerity and performance." Meanwhile, Lily noticed a young waiter struggling to balance several heavy serving trays while another employee hurried to assist guests at the dessert station. Without hesitation, she looked at her. "Father, can I help?" Nathan smiled gently. "Ask first." Lily walked over with innocent confidence. "Excuse me, sir. Would you like me to carry the napkins?" The exhausted waiter laughed warmly. "That would actually help a lot." Lily proudly carried a stack of folded linen napkins across the room while Nathan followed at a respectful distance. Several guests smiled at the little girl, and even those who had laughed earlier found themselves watching the father and daughter with quieter expressions. Nathan never encouraged the attention. Every time someone complimented Lily, he redirected the conversation toward her instead of himself. "She gets her heart from her mother," he said more than once. Those simple words carried a depth of loss that few noticed. Standing on the upper balcony once again, Charlotte observed the interactions unfolding below. Instead of seeing humility, she convinced herself she was watching calculated charm. "He's remarkably comfortable attracting sympathy," she muttered under her breath. Melissa hesitated before answering. "Or maybe, he's simply being himself." Charlotte looked at her assistant with mild surprise before turning away. "We'll see." At that very moment, the grand entrance doors slowly opened again. Several security personnel straightened instinctively. Conversations near the foyer softened as a distinguished elderly man in civilian attire entered the hotel with measured confidence, accompanied by two uniformed military officers. Only a handful of guests recognized him immediately. Those who did fell silent, their expressions shifting from casual curiosity to unmistakable respect. Nathan had not yet noticed the new arrival. But somewhere across the ballroom, fate had already begun walking toward him. Sometimes destiny doesn't knock politely. It simply walks through the front door. A quiet ripple spread across the ballroom as conversations gradually faded into whispers. Guests nearest the entrance instinctively stepped aside, creating a clear path without anyone asking them to move. Nathan, focused on helping Lily choose a small dessert from the buffet, remained completely unaware of the subtle transformation unfolding. Behind him. "Dad," Lily said excitedly, pointing toward a tray of miniature chocolate cakes. "Can I have one?" Nathan laughed softly. "Only if you promise to save room for breakfast tomorrow." She giggled. "That's impossible." Their ordinary conversation stood in striking contrast to the growing tension filling the elegant hall. At the entrance, General Richard Holloway entered with the calm confidence of a man who had spent decades carrying responsibilities far greater than public attention. Although dressed in a tailored dark suit rather than his formal military uniform, his bearing alone commanded immediate respect. Two younger officers accompanied him, but neither attempted to walk ahead. They remained half a step behind without conscious thought. Harold Benson recognized him first. His eyes widened before he hurried forward. "General Holloway," he said warmly, extending his hand. "What an honor!" The general returned the handshake with a polite smile. "Harold. It's been too long." Other distinguished guests soon gathered around, eager to greet one of the nation's most respected military leaders. Charlotte Whitmore noticed the commotion almost instantly. She quickly crossed the ballroom with several board members, her confident smile returning as photographers redirected their cameras toward the unexpected guest. "General Holloway," Charlotte said graciously. Welcome to the Whitmore Foundation Gala. We're honored by your presence. The general nodded courteously. Thank you for the invitation. Charlotte gestured toward the ballroom. Please allow me to introduce you to our donors and sponsors. To everyone's surprise, the general glanced only briefly in her direction before his eyes began moving slowly across the crowded room. It was not the casual look of someone admiring decorations. It was the focused search of someone looking for a particular face. Charlotte paused, momentarily confused. General? He offered a polite apology. Forgive me. I'm actually hoping someone is here tonight. He continued scanning the room with remarkable patience. One of the officers accompanying him leaned closer and quietly asked, Sir, should I assist? The general shook his head. No. I'll know him when I see him. Meanwhile, Tom Reynolds had quietly moved closer to Nathan. He was still studying the silver ring on Nathan's hand, searching his memory for the forgotten insignia. Excuse me, Tom said carefully. Were you ever in the army? Nathan looked up, surprised by the question. After a brief pause, he answered simply, A long time ago. May I ask which unit? Nathan smiled politely but offered nothing more. That chapter of my life is behind me. Tom sensed the conversation was over and respected the boundary. Before he could step away, General Holloway's gaze suddenly froze across the ballroom. Time itself seemed to hesitate. The general stared silently toward the dessert table where Nathan stood beside Lily. His composed expression softened into unmistakable recognition. For several seconds he did not move at all. Then, without another word to Charlotte or the executives surrounding him, he began walking. Not toward the stage. Not toward the sponsors. Not toward the cameras waiting to capture photographs. He walked directly across the ballroom toward the quietly dressed single father holding a small plate with a slice of chocolate cake for his daughter. Conversations died away one by one as people noticed the unusual direction of the general's steps. Charlotte turned to watch, puzzled. Melissa followed his path with growing curiosity. Harold Benson smiled faintly, as though an answer he had been searching for was finally about to reveal itself. Nathan remained unaware until Lily gently tugged on his sleeve. Dad, she whispered, I think that important man is coming to see you. The greatest heroes rarely remember the medals they earned. They remember the names they could not bring home. No one in the ballroom dared interrupt the silence after Nathan's quiet words. The applause that usually followed speeches never came. Instead, hundreds of guests stood motionless, held captive by a kind of respect that could not be requested or rehearsed. General Holloway slowly turned toward the audience. Nathan would never tell you what happened, he said calmly. So allow me to share only what can be shared. Nathan lowered his eyes. Sir, the general gently shook his head. You have protected enough people in your lifetime. Tonight, allow others to honor you. The room remained perfectly still. Even the musicians had quietly lowered their instruments. 17 years ago, General Holloway began. One of our reconnaissance teams became trapped behind enemy lines during an operation that went terribly wrong. Communications were failing. Air support was impossible. Every minute reduced the chances of bringing those soldiers home alive. Several veterans in the audience listened with solemn expressions. They recognized the tone of someone remembering a day that never truly left him. The rescue mission required someone willing to enter an area every intelligence report described as nearly impossible to survive. The general looked directly at Nathan. Before I could finish asking for volunteers, Sergeant First Class Nathan Brooks stepped forward. Charlotte felt her breathing slow. Around her, executives who had once smiled at her remarks now stared silently at the father she had dismissed. Nathan led a small rescue team through conditions that should have defeated them. The general continued. He reached our men. He carried one wounded soldier on his own shoulders for nearly 3 miles after refusing to leave anyone behind. Lily looked up at her father with astonishment she could barely understand. You carried someone? She whispered. Nathan gave a small nod. He couldn't walk. Were you scared? Nathan smiled gently. Everyone gets scared, sweetheart. Courage means doing the right thing anyway. Tears quietly appeared in the eyes of several guests. The general continued. Nathan himself was seriously injured before the mission ended. He never spoke publicly about it. He declined interviews. He refused opportunities that would have made him famous. His only request was that the families of the fallen receive every honor they deserved. Harold Benson quietly removed his glasses, wiping away moisture gathering in his eyes. Tom Reynolds stood with both hands clasped behind his back, instinctively assuming a posture of respect. Charlotte felt each sentence settle heavily against her conscience. She remembered speaking about contribution. She remembered implying that some people attended charity events expecting others to carry them. Standing only a few yards away was a man who had once literally carried another human being to safety. And he had never told anyone. A reporter slowly raised the camera before lowering it again without taking a photograph. Somehow, the moment felt too sacred to interrupt. General Holloway reached inside his jacket and carefully removed a worn photograph. Time had softened its edges, but the image remained clear enough to reveal a younger Nathan standing beside several fellow soldiers. One place in the front row had been marked with a small black ribbon. This picture has remained on my desk for 17 years, the general said quietly. Not because it reminds me of victory. Because it reminds me of sacrifice. Nathan accepted the photograph with both hands. His fingers lingered briefly over the black ribbon before he smiled with quiet sadness. Daniel always hated having his picture taken, he murmured. He said photographs made him look too serious. The general chuckled softly through moist eyes. He was wrong. Nathan looked at Lily. He was one of the bravest people I've ever known. Lily slipped her small hand into her father's without saying anything. She finally understood why her father never spoke about the medals stored away in an old wooden box at home. They had never represented glory to him. They represented people. And in that silent ballroom, every person present began to understand that true greatness is measured not by the honor someone receives, but by the burdens they quietly choose to carry. Character is revealed most clearly when a person is given every reason to seek revenge and chooses grace instead. The silence that followed General Holloway's words lingered for several long seconds before it was broken by a slow, heartfelt applause. One pair of hands began clapping near the back of the ballroom. Another quickly joined. Then another. Within moments, the entire hall rose to its feet. Executives, donors, waiters, photographers, musicians, and guests stood together, offering Nathan Brooks the longest standing ovation the Whitmore Foundation Gala had ever witnessed. Nathan looked visibly uncomfortable. He squeezed Lily's hand and quietly shook his head, as though wishing the attention would settle elsewhere. They're clapping for you, Lily whispered, smiling proudly. Nathan leaned down and softly replied, No, sweetheart. They're clapping for everyone who served. I'm simply lucky enough to be standing here. Those nearest him heard the words, and the respect in their eyes only deepened. Across the ballroom, Charlotte remained frozen. The applause echoed around her, yet all she could hear were the careless assumptions she had spoken earlier that evening. Every polished sentence she had delivered about dignity and generosity now felt painfully hollow. She slowly walked toward Nathan, each step heavier than the last. The applause gradually faded as the guests sensed something important was about to happen. Charlotte stopped a few feet away from Nathan and Lily. For the first time that evening, there was no confidence in her posture, no carefully rehearsed smile, no desire to impress the room. She simply looked at the man she had judged without knowing his story. Mr. Brooks, she said quietly, her voice almost trembling. I owe you an apology. Nathan met her eyes without anger. You don't owe me anything. Charlotte gently shook her head. I do. She drew a slow breath before continuing. I looked at your clothes instead of your character. I assumed your worth before learning your name. Tonight I spoke about compassion while failing to practice it myself. The room remained silent. No cameras flashed. No one interrupted. I'm deeply sorry, Charlotte continued. Not because of who you turned out to be, but because I should never have treated anyone that way in the first place. Nathan remained quiet for a moment before offering a small, understanding smile. We all make judgments we later regret. Charlotte lowered her eyes. Can you forgive me? Nathan glanced briefly at Lily before answering. My daughter watches everything I do. If I teach her anything tonight, I hope it's that forgiveness heals people faster than resentment ever can. Charlotte blinked back tears. Thank you. Nathan extended his hand without hesitation. She accepted it, and they shook hands as equals. The gesture was simple, yet it carried more meaning than any speech delivered that evening. General Holloway watched with quiet approval. Harold Benson smiled softly. Even Melissa felt tears gathering in her eyes. Lily tugged gently on Charlotte's sleeve. My dad says people can become better after they make mistakes. Charlotte knelt to meet the little girl's eyes. Your dad is a very wise man. Lily grinned. I think so too. A gentle laugh spread through the ballroom, easing the emotional weight that had filled the room only moments earlier. Charlotte stood once more and turned toward the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice now carrying genuine humility. Tonight's greatest lesson was never written into my speech. She looked back at Nathan. It walked through our doors wearing an old navy blazer. This time, the applause returned, not as a celebration of military honors or public recognition, but as a tribute to the quiet strength of a father who had never needed the world to know who he was in order to live with honor every single day. The strongest legacy a parent can leave behind is not wealth or recognition, but an example worth following. Several weeks after the gala, autumn had settled gently over the city, painting the neighborhood trees in shades of amber and gold. Life for Nathan Brooks looked remarkably unchanged. Every morning he still drove the same aging pickup truck to work. He still repaired broken equipment before anyone asked. He still returned home each evening in time to help Lily with her homework before they shared simple dinners around the small kitchen table. The medals remained inside the old wooden box in his bedroom closet, exactly where they had always been. Nothing about fame interested him. Everything about fatherhood did. One Saturday morning, Lily sat at the dining table carefully drawing a picture for school. At the top of the page she wrote, My hero. Instead of sketching someone in military uniform, she drew her father wearing his faded navy blazer while holding her hand. Beneath the drawing she carefully printed, My dad helps people even when nobody is watching. Nathan quietly read the sentence over her shoulder. He smiled, kissed the top of her head, and whispered, I'm proud of you. Lily looked up with complete sincerity. I'm proud of you too. Across town, Charlotte Whitmore stood before the board of her foundation introducing a new initiative. It would provide scholarships for the children of veterans and emergency responders, while every volunteer working foundation events would receive the same respect regardless of position or appearance. At the entrance to every future gala, a simple bronze plaque would greet each guest with words Charlotte insisted be permanently engraved. Every person who walks through these doors deserves dignity before judgment. She never mentioned Nathan's name during the meeting. She didn't need to. The lesson had already transformed the culture of her organization. Harold Benson later smiled when he saw the plaque unveiled. General Holloway attended quietly without speeches or ceremony. He simply nodded once before leaving, satisfied that the greatest victory from that evening had not been public recognition but lasting change. Months later, Lily's school invited parents to Career Day. Children introduced doctors, firefighters, engineers, business owners, and pilots. When Lily stood before her classmates, she smiled confidently. My dad fixes things, she began. A few children looked puzzled. She continued, He fixes machines at work, but he also fixes people's hearts by being kind. Nathan, sitting quietly in the back of the classroom, felt his eyes fill with tears. The teacher asked, What makes your father special? Lily answered without hesitation. He doesn't tell people he's a hero. He just acts like one every day. The room fell into the same thoughtful silence that had once filled the grand ballroom. On the drive home, Lily looked out the truck window before asking softly, Dad, do you ever wish more people knew what you did in the army? Nathan considered the question for a moment before smiling. No, sweetheart. Why not? He reached over and gently squeezed her hand. Because if one little girl grows up believing kindness is stronger than pride, then I've already received every medal I'll ever need. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windshield as they continued down the quiet road together. The world outside still hurried to measure people by titles, clothing, and success. But inside that old pickup truck rode a father who had learned long ago that true honor never depends on applause, and a daughter who would carry that lesson for the rest of her life. Some guests would forever remember the night an army general saluted a humble single dad. But those who truly understood the story remembered something even greater. The salute revealed a soldier, yet it was the quiet love of a father that revealed the finest man in the room.